When you buy something at the store, the transaction feels, I don't know, beautifully simple.
Right, yeah. You just pay and leave.
Exactly. You look at the price tag, you tap your card, the money leaves your bank account, and you walk out with your shoes or your groceries. It's a closed loop.
For you, at least.
Yeah, for you. But when you zoom out to international trade, like global supply chains and sweeping government tariffs, that simple receipt in your pocket suddenly turns into a multi-billion-dollar black box.
It really does. It gets so complicated so fast.
And today, we are ripping the lid off that box. Welcome to today's deep dive. We're looking at a fascinating opinion piece by Eric Reinhardt.
Published on August 8, 2026.
Yep. Titled, "We Paid Trump's Tariffs, Corporate America Got the Refund." And I have to say right up front, Reinhardt's piece is fiery.
Oh, absolutely. It pulls no punches.
No punches at all. He takes some very heavy, very impassioned political swings at the administration and specific political figures. So, just to set the ground rules for you listening right now, we aren't here to play political referee.
Right? No taking sides today.
Definitely not. Left, right, whatever. We are not endorsing his viewpoints. Our mission today is strictly to strip away the politics and just follow the actual math.
The math and the legal mechanisms, yeah.
Exactly. We want to understand the core arguments Reinhardt lays out, because this stuff affects your wallet directly.
And the mechanics of it are incredibly complex once you get past all that surface rhetoric. I mean, we are looking at a scenario where a government collects billions of dollars in tariffs.
Billions.
Right, billions. And then the courts step in and rule those exact tariffs illegal.
Okay.
But the ensuing refunds, they completely bypass the everyday consumers who originally footed the bill.
Wow.
Yeah, the money goes directly back to massive corporate entities instead.
So consumers are just like bleeding cash at the register, probably assuming this is just the new normal of inflation or, supply chain friction.
Exactly. They just think it's inflation.
But behind the scenes, there was a legal time bomb ticking on the very authority used to collect that money. And to kind of ground this massive economic abstraction, Reinhardt anchors his argument on a single everyday purchase, a pair of Nike Air Max 95s.
Manufactured in Vietnam.
Right. And he bought them for $200.
Yeah.
And he makes it very clear that this isn't just like a sneakerhead flex.
No, not at all.
He's an Air Force veteran with a service-connected disability. He is literally missing the arches in his feet.
Ow.
Right. So he genuinely requires this serious structural support that these specific shoes provide. Cheap shoes literally leave him in pain.
Yeah, he is a captive consumer in that regard. He can't just, opt out of the market and buy cheap flip-flops.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Think of a tariff kind of like a mandatory cover charge at a venue.
Okay, I like that.
The venue, meaning the importing company, is legally required to hand the money to the bouncer, which is the government. But they don't want to lose money, so they just hike up the price of your ticket to cover it.
Right, and this is where we really have to look at the mechanics of how a tariff actually permeates a supply chain. Because a lot of the political rhetoric suggests that the foreign manufacturing country, in this case, Vietnam, pays the tariff.
Which Reinhardt says is false.
He flatly points out the economic reality. Vietnam didn't pay a dime to the U.S. government. Nike did.
Nike wrote the check.
Nike wrote the check. But Nike didn't absorb that cost out of the goodness of their hearts,
But wait, Nike operates in a highly competitive market, right? If they just arbitrarily raise prices to cover a massive tariff, don't they risk losing market share to, like, Adidas or New Balance?
You'd think so.
How did they pass that cost down without completely tanking their sales volume?
Well, they did it through a strategy their own chief financial officer publicly referred to back in 2025 as surgical price increases.
Surgical.
Yeah, surgical. They didn't just blanket a flat, $2 price hike across their entire inventory.
Because it would tick everyone off.
Right. That would spook the budget-conscious consumers and drag down their overall sales metrics. Instead, they isolated the tariff impact onto their premium tiers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, the data in Reinhardt's piece shows that adult shoes priced above $150 carried the largest burden. They got bumped up by as much as $10 a pair.
So they essentially hid the tariff in the elasticity of the premium market.
Precisely.
Like if you're already dropping $190 on specialized sneakers, you're probably not going to walk out of the store over an extra $10.
Exactly.
Right.
And because Reinhardt's medically necessary shoes cost $200, they fell directly into that highest price increase bracket.
Right.
So he paid $10 more at the register, specifically and exclusively because of that tariff. Nike paid the border tax, but they immediately balanced their books by extracting that exact amount, plus, let's be real, likely a little margin for the trouble from the consumer.
Which means the domestic consumer is the one actually financing the geopolitical trade war.
Yep.
And Reinhart pulls back the lens to show just how vast this dispersion of cost was. He cites the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office.
The CBO.
Yeah, the CBO, which calculated that American families and businesses ultimately bore roughly 95% of the entire tariff burden.
Let's just linger on that 95% figure for a second.
It's crazy.
Because the mechanics of it are staggering. That means for every $100 the government collected at the ports, 95 of those dollars were quietly extracted from the disposable income of domestic buyers.
Wow.
And the Tax Foundation modeled this out, too. They estimated that all these tariffs combined cost the typical American household roughly $1,000 in the year 2025 alone.
$1,000.
That is a massive, invisible consumption tax, just spread across millions of microtransactions, from sneakers to groceries to auto parts.
And most people just chalked it up to general inflation. They had no idea.
None.
But here is where it gets really interesting. This is where the story shifts from a lesson in supply chain pricing to an absolute legal earthquake.
Oh, yeah, February 2026.
Yes, February 2026. The Supreme Court stepped in and actually struck down these specific emergency powers tariffs.
Right.
And I want to dig into the legal mechanism here, because the court didn't just say, tariffs are bad.
No, they don't do that.
They ruled specifically on the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA. What exactly is IEPA, and why did it fail to hold up in court?
So IEPA was designed in the 1970s, essentially, to give the president the power to freeze the assets of foreign adversaries during extreme national security threats.
Like actual wars?
Right. Think terrorist networks or hostile regimes developing weapons.
Okay.
But over the years, the executive branch started stretching the interpretation of that law.
As they do.
Yeah, exactly, trying to gain leverage in general trade disputes and economic negotiations. But the Supreme Court essentially drew a hard line.
They said enough is enough.
Right. They looked at the administration's use of IEPA to impose broad, sweeping tariffs on everyday consumer goods and ruled that trade imbalances, while maybe problematic, do not constitute the kind of unusual and extraordinary national security threat that the law was written to address.
Wow.
So the executive branch lacked the statutory authority. The tariffs were deemed unconstitutional.
Which triggers a massive domino effect. If the government collected the money illegally, they have to give it back.
They do.
But let me play devil's advocate for a moment here, just on behalf of you, the listener, because the legal flow of this money is what Reinhart is so furious about.
Yeah.
Wait, so legally speaking, because the corporations were the registered importers of record, the ones who took the upfront cash flow hit, right?
Yep.
They managed the legal compliance at the ports. They physically wrote the checks to U.S. Customs, so they were the only ones legally entitled to the refund, even if the consumer actually absorbed the cost.
You've isolated the exact friction point of this entire crisis, the chasm between legal reality and economic reality.
Oh.
You are completely right. The law recognizes the importer of record. The law does not recognize the millions of consumers down the chain who actually absorbed the cost through those surgical price increases.
That is wild.
So, U.S. Customs and Border Protection is currently processing approximately $166 billion in refunds.
$166 billion.
And they are legally obligated to send those checks straight back to the corporate entities.
It's hard to even contextualize that much capital.
Well, according to the source, by August 4, 2026, over $100 billion of that money had already been returned to companies. And crucially, that includes interest.
With interest.
Right.
So let's look at what this actually means in practice. Let's reframe this from the corporate perspective.
Okay.
If Nike passes the tariff cost on to Eric Reinhart at the register, they haven't lost any money.
Not a cent.
Then the Supreme Court rules the tariff illegal, and Nike gets their original border payment refunded by the government.
Plus interest.
Plus interest. This isn't just a refund. The corporations essentially forced the American public to crowdsource a massive interest-free loan for them, and then the government paid them a premium on the back end.
That is the exact mechanism of the wealth transfer that Reinhart is highlighting. And Nike is just one localized example. He lists some of the largest reported refunds that have either already been received or are expected by major corporations, and the scale is just mind-numbing.
Let's hear the receipts.
Well, Apple has already received $2.2 billion.
Yes.
Amazon received $600 million. Energizer, just selling batteries, got about $50 million back.
And the expectations for retailers who rely on massive import volumes are even higher. Like Walmart is expecting up to $10.2 billion.
$10.2 billion.
Target is eligible for up to $2.2 billion. Ford is looking at $1.3 billion. And General Motors is expecting $500 million.
Yeah.
We are talking about an unprecedented injection of liquidity straight into corporate balance sheets.
Exactly. And Reinhart wants the reader, he wants you listening, to juxtapose those billions against your own daily reality.
Right.
He asks you to look at your own household budget over the last few years. Think about navigating that invisible $1,000 tax in 2025.
Living paycheck to paycheck.
Yeah. People were putting basic essentials, groceries, gas, daycare, rent on credit cards carrying 20% interest rates, just to absorb the rising cost of living.
So painful.
The American consumer acted as the financial shock absorber for this entire geopolitical strategy. And when the dust settled, the relief went strictly to the entities that experienced the least amount of actual friction.
It makes complete sense why Reinhart refers to this as a damn affront.
Yeah, he was mad.
But what really twists the knife here is that a direct consumer refund was actually promised. This wasn't just a pipe dream. There was high-level political rhetoric promising to make the public whole.
Yes. The gap between political promises and fiscal realities is a major pillar of his critique. He points back to November 9, 2025.
What happened then?
President Trump publicly promised a tariff dividend of at least $2,000 for low and middle income Americans.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, it was touted as a direct cash injection to offset exactly the kind of economic pain we've been discussing. The White House even doubled down on that commitment in the press shortly after.
A $2,000 dividend sounds incredibly close to the $1,000 per year burden the tax foundation calculated. So why didn't it happen? If the White House wanted it and the public clearly needed it, where did the breakdown occur?
Well, the breakdown occurred because the executive branch doesn't possess the power of the purse. A president can promise a dividend, but they cannot unilaterally appropriate federal funds to cut a check to citizens.
Right, that requires Congress.
Exactly,
Right.
an act of Congress.
Right.
But there was no enacted program, no legislation passed, and no framework established.
Nothing.
Nothing. And when pushed on why Congress wasn't moving to authorize this money for the American people, Republican Senator Ron Johnson dismissed the entire concept with a very blunt statement.
What did he say?
He said, "We can't afford it."
We can't afford it. That specific phrase is where Reinhart directs a massive amount of analytical outrage. He digs into the national deficit to expose the hypocrisy of that affordability argument.
Oh yeah, he tears into it.
And I want to look closely at how he does this, because he doesn't just complain about the deficit. He breaks down how deficit logic is weaponized depending on who is asking for the money.
Exactly. He tracks the trajectory of the national debt to show that austerity is incredibly selective.
Right.
He notes that the annual deficit inherited in fiscal year 2017 was $665 billion. By 2019, and it's critical to note this is entirely pre-COVID, before any pandemic emergency spending, that deficit had climbed to $984 billion.
So it was already shooting up.
Right. Fast forward to the present day in 2026, and the Congressional Budget Office is projecting a $1.9 trillion annual deficit.
Insane.
Furthermore, he points out that the 2025 tax and spending law is projected to add another $3.4 trillion to federal deficits by 2034.
So the mechanism of deficit spending is running at full tilt when it comes to sweeping tax reforms or government spending packages.
Exactly.
But the moment a $2,000 dividend for the working class is proposed, the deficit subtly transforms into an insurmountable brick wall.
Right.
Reinhart's core argument here is that the deficit is treated less like a mathematical reality and more like a political filter used to justify denying consumer aid.
And to really solidify that point about selective fiscal priorities, he points to the starkest example of government spending currently happening.
Which is?
The ongoing war with Iran.
Right, the conflict that began on February 28, 2026. And Reinhart frames this very specifically. He notes it as a war of choice against a nation that had not directly attacked the American homeland.
Yep.
What really matters for his economic argument, though, is the sheer velocity of the spending.
It's staggering.
By July 21, the Pentagon acknowledged the conflict had already cost taxpayers $37.5 billion. By the time he wrote this article in early August, that figure was scraping against $40 billion.
And that $40 billion is just the direct military expenditure. It doesn't factor in the secondary macroeconomic shockwaves,
Like what?
particularly the spike in global energy prices. Higher energy costs compound the exact same problems the tariffs caused. It becomes vastly more expensive for a logistics company to ship groceries to your local supermarket or for a family to heat their home.
So you look at the ledger Reinhardt has constructed here. The government rapidly procures $40 billion to finance a foreign conflict.
Right.
The government smoothly processes over $100 billion in legal refunds to corporate entities.
Yep.
But when it comes to the citizens who actually funded the illegal tariffs at the register, the ledger reads zero. The government didn't lack the capital, they simply chose not to allocate it to the public.
Which brings us to the ultimate question of restitution, because it's not as if the corporate world is entirely silent on this windfall.
Right, they see the PR nightmare.
Oh, they definitely do. Some of these massive retailers, particularly companies like Walmart, they've gone to the press and suggested that they intend to use these billions in tariff refunds to implement price rollbacks.
Rollbacks.
Yeah, or find innovative ways of returning value to consumers over the coming quarters.
So what does this all mean for the consumer?
Yeah.
What is the author actually demanding? I find this corporate counter-argument absolutely fascinating, and Reinhardt's rejection of it is razor sharp.
It really is.
Because what Walmart is essentially offering is a customer acquisition strategy disguised as justice.
Right.
It's like overpaying a mechanic by $500, and when they get caught, instead of giving your cash back, they offer you a discount on your next oil change.
That is the exact dynamic.
Yeah.
And Reinhardt fundamentally rejects the idea that a future corporate pricing strategy is an acceptable substitute for past financial damages.
A discount isn't a refund.
Exactly. A marketing campaign promising lower prices on television's next Black Friday is not accountability. The American people already parted with this money.
They need it now.
Right. They didn't lose it in a future transaction. They lost it yesterday when they were trying to pay for daycare, healthcare premiums, prescriptions, and rent.
A rollback on a toaster oven in 2027 doesn't retroactively pay the electric bill that a family put on a high-interest credit card in 2025.
Beautifully said. His economic philosophy here is simple and unyielding. If American households carried the initial financial burden of the tariffs, American households must be the direct recipients of the refunds, period. No corporate middlemen.
So what does he actually want people to do about it? He issues a very aggressive, very specific call to action.
He really does.
He notes that Congress is currently in recess, which means these representatives are sitting in their home districts right now.
Yeah.
He isn't asking people to just post angrily on social media.
Yeah, that's not a...
He is demanding that citizens physically mobilize, flood their local district offices, dominate town hall meetings, and tie up the phone lines in Washington.
And he arms the reader with a very specific, undeniable question that they shouldn't let any politician pivot away from.
What's the question?
If American consumers paid nearly the entire cost of the tariffs, why are corporations receiving more than $100 billion in refunds while the American people receive absolutely nothing?
Wow. He wants legislation forced onto the floor that intercepts this capital and redistributes it as a direct cash dividend to households.
Exactly.
He is urging the public to completely tune out any more speeches about how tariffs are a weapon to punish foreign nations. Because going all the way back to his original purchase, his sneakers were manufactured in Vietnam.
Right.
Vietnam didn't pay the penalty.
Yeah.
Nike paid it, extracted the $10 cost from him through surgical pricing, received a $300 million legal refund from U.S. Customs, and left him holding the bag.
When you take that single $10 receipt from an Air Force veteran in a shoe store and you multiply it by hundreds of millions of American consumers across every conceivable sector of the retail economy,
It's massive.
you start to grasp the magnitude of what Reinhardt is fighting against. It is one of the most massive, legally sanctioned redistributions of wealth from the working class to the corporate class in modern history.
It really is a phenomenal breakdown of how invisible economic machinery actually operates. So just to recap the ground we've covered on this deep dive today.
I covered a lot.
We did. We started with the microeconomics of a simple $10 markup on a pair of supportive sneakers. We explored how those costs were surgically hidden in premium pricing tiers, acting as a massive consumption tax.
Yep.
We examined the legal earthquake of the Supreme Court, striking down the executive use of the IEPA law, triggering a $166 billion corporate windfall based entirely on the technicality of who served as the importer of record.
Right.
And finally, we unpack the fierce debate over restitution, contrasting broken political promises and selective deficit anxiety against the demand for direct cash-in-hand relief for the public.
It's a vital reminder that macroeconomic policy isn't just, an abstract theory debated in marble buildings in Washington.
No, it's real life.
It is the literal mechanism that dictates how much money leaves your wallet every single time you tap your card at a register.
And it dictates who gets that money back when the system breaks the rules.
Mm-hmm.
But before we wrap up today, I want to throw one final provocative thought into this debate. Something Reinhardt doesn't address in his piece, but that is absolutely critical to consider.
Okay, let's hear it.
Let's say this call to action actually works. Let's say millions of people flood the town halls, Congress caves, and they mandate that the $166 billion must be returned directly to the consumers as a cash refund.
Oh, wow. The logistics of executing that would be an absolute nightmare.
Right. How do you even begin to unwind a hidden consumption tax fairly?
That is the impossible question. I mean, do you just authorize the IRS to send a flat $1,000 check to every adult citizen?
That sounds easy.
It does, but if you do that, you are severely undercompensating the small business owners or larger families who bought significantly more tariff-heavy goods and absorbed far more of the cost.
Yeah, that's true.
But the alternative is even worse. Does the government require citizens to produce 3 years' worth of individual consumer receipts for every pair of shoes, every car part, every washing machine, just to calculate an equitable, prorated refund?
That would require a bureaucratic infrastructure that doesn't even exist.
Yeah.
And the administrative cost of auditing millions of grocery receipts would probably eat half the refund money anyway.
Exactly. The legal battle to prove the tariffs were unconstitutional might actually end up looking incredibly simple compared to the logistical nightmare of trying to put $166 billion of toothpaste back into the tube fairly.
That is a deeply complicated problem to chew on. How do you engineer true restitution when the theft was practically invisible? Well, we will leave you to mull over that logistical puzzle on your own. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Eric Reinhardt's analysis. Keep questioning the systems around you, always look closely at your receipts, and we'll see you next time.